That's not something that just fixes itself. Schizophrenic episode, he probably is not seeking help, and I'm sure that's carrying over.
By 1979, he was divorced from the second wife, married a third wife. Her name was Betty Sue Edwards Galloway. She was a security guard for Stone Mountain State Park. They divorced only 7 months after marrying.
So that didn't work at all.
She would claim during their marriage, Gary forced her to resign from her law enforcement job because he was running a charity scam.
Yeah, so you'll see this over and over in Gary's life. For one, he loves the outdoors. So it's no surprise he met his third wife there at Stone Mountain. I'm sure he was just there being, a visitor. And he is not real big on 9-to-5s. And he is not afraid to run a scam.
It is too bad that Gary did not have access to TikTok, Patreon, YouTube. He could have just been a do-it-yourself podcaster and made money and made his own schedule, right?
Yeah, he could have recorded out in the damn woods.
The charity scam, I'll get into that just a little bit. I don't know a bunch about it, but, he had this fake charity. He would call businesses. They would agree to write a check. Then he would send his wife to go pick the checks up from these businesses, just rip people off. Yeah. The marriage ended, sued the girl, but said he didn't think it was a big deal because she wasn't his daughter.
That's disgusting.
Yeah.
What's a big deal to me, you son of a bitch? So I'm her right now. I'm gonna kill you.
He'd exposed his penis to her son and asked the boy to touch it as well.
Can't wrap my head around speaking to a child like that and doing that to a child. I can't. I'm sorry.
Right. So she kicked his ass out, as most people would, I would imagine, right?
I would be a little stronger reaction from me.
Again, he bounces around some more, and by 1981, he finds himself in another relationship with Wagner. Wagner had a 13-year-old daughter. Her name was Stephanie. Gary became a father figure to her. For 2 years that he dated Constance, he was very active in Stephanie's life. He drove her to school, made her eat properly, always made sure she had a nice, hearty breakfast before school, came to her ball games, gave her money.
You think it's because he liked her?
Was really active in her life?
Creepy way.
Well, Stephanie said he was funny, outgoing, and really good to her. She cared about him, and nothing creepy ever happened, according to her.
See, it's interesting that he can connect with people. He can't, yes, these are failed marriages, but he keeps finding someone else willing to marry him. So he must be either his impulses or what later leads to killing and hunting people is not fully developed in him, or he's just really good at hiding, keeping those things separate, which is true with many serial killers.
Yeah, like a Ted Bundy.
But these seem to be genuine connection. That seems to be like they had a real genuine interpersonal relationship, a happy someone.
I find the fact that Gary, this maniac person who is now in prison, oops, spoiler alert, have multiple marriages. And
be brought into their existing, children's lives. They already got kids, so they don't have a problem bringing this guy into the household and actually, in this case here, letting him assume the father figure, which is a big deal, to a 13-year-old daughter. That's that time when I feel like girls and boys, but girls especially, really need a connection with a male figure in their life.
In 1983, Gary was arrested for carrying a pistol without a license and a drug charge. And I think it was weed. During the late 80s, Hilton would have brushes with the law, including fraud charges, or what they call theft by deception, as well as drug offenses. It was in 1994 that he was charged with 21 counts of solicitation.
Now, at first, I thought, this dude is into prostitutes, right? That's your first thought. This was actually for the act of soliciting. Him trying to get one of his scams off. I did discover that in my research. So it's not prostitutes. It is actually going to someone and soliciting his wares, the goods, whatever scam. And all you see the door signs on all the doors, no soliciting. That's actually a thing. So that's what that was about.
Well, yeah. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what that was about. He stole books from the American Book Display Company. He was hired to be a bookseller, but instead he took the books, ran off, and tried to sell them for his own profit.
So he's always looking for that get-rich-quick scheme, anything to keep him so he can go do what he likes. Go be in nature, smoke some pot, and just do his own thing.
But 21 counts, that seems like a lot.
Yeah, I'm going to guess they hammered him and they got him on every instance. Either he contacted someone else and tried to sell the books, or you know how they load the charges up on you.
He was given 10 years probation. Oddly enough, in 1995, Hilton worked on the movie Deadly Run.
I thought this was very interesting.
Now, he claims he was a producer of this movie, although I don't believe he has a producer's credit.
No, but he had a big hand in the idea of the movie.
He sold the filmmaker on this idea about a serial killer who murdered women in the woods.
How crazy is that?
Yeah.
And so the filmmaker's like, your story is compelling, right? He wants to I want to make this movie. This is a great idea you got. It seems real. You know why? It's because this son of a bitch is something he thinks about.
This is like a really low budget indie horror type of film.
I wonder if we can find it.
That's our mission while we're quarantined.
Okay.
Hilton was dependent on drugs and alcohol, often using Quaaludes and LSD. Now, I don't know a whole lot about Quaaludes. Now, I know they were like really popular in like the 70s and early 80s.
And then they were just banned.
Right. But, I mean, what does Quaaludes... I mean, I know what LSD does, not from personal experience, because I'm a square, but like what kind of high do you get from Quaaludes?
Again, I'm like you. It's just some mythical thing you hear about. Our parents talk about people being on lewds. I think it's a downer.
Like in the disco days?
I think it's a downer. I don't think it's a stimulant. That's all I know about it.
I was thinking that. So maybe using the Quaaludes was his way of self-medicating and coping with his mental illness.
And I'm sure that's why I'm sure that's why he probably preferred to smoke pot and things like that. I'm sure his brain was just all over the place.
He couldn't hold down a steady job other than working occasionally as a telemarketer. He had periods of joblessness and homelessness during this time. He had a really hard time just functioning in society.
Yeah.
Just being like a regular working, tax-paying, law-abiding citizen.
But it's interesting. It seems like when he wants to, he can do it. But like
in short increments.
Short increments, and he has to want, for some reason, be compelled to just act normal and go through a normal day. But he's not scared to live out of his vehicle and just be floating around and not know where his next meal's coming from. He's kind of a drifter type, loner.
Yeah, definitely. It was on December 1st, 1994, a woman named Melissa Witt disappeared from a bowling alley parking lot in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Her lifeless nude body was found about 60 miles away near Turner Bend, which is located in the Ozark National Forest. Her murder remains unsolved, and there are quite a few suspects, but Hilton has not been ruled out in the crime. Her murder has haunting similarities to Gary's later victims.
It does. It nails it because you'll get into that, but there's multiple big similarities there.
In 1997, after having burned through a plethora of jobs, Hilton met a man named John Tabor who owned insulated wall systems. He hired Gary to work for him selling siding and giving him a place to live. I believe it was like a trailer or something like on the property of the business.
Yeah, it was nothing fancy. It's almost like either a trailer or like a back room.
Camper, yeah.
Yeah.
Office apartment, something like that.
Yes.
But this is in Georgia. And during this time, Hilton managed to be a fairly good employee for Tabor.
Well, I think because of the nature of the job, he's doing siding. I think people our age remember when that was a big deal, right? People come by and like literally try to sell your parents siding. But I think it wasn't like a 9 to 5. He could make his calls when he wanted. This guy's, he's got room and board, so there's less pressure with the rent and things like that. And I think it was one of those things he could do when he wanted and still do the things he liked. So I think that's how he was able to stick with it for a decade.
Well, and I think we're seeing a pattern here that Hilton clearly had struggles functioning in society.
Yes.
And as you said, he could do it for some period of time, a year, maybe 2 years. But then it was like the urge would overtake him. He just couldn't do this anymore.
He didn't want to do it.
Free, right?
Yeah.
But it seems like the times when he can kind of function, it's because there's a benefit to him.
Very much so.
Like the long play.
Yes.
Like he could take advantage of the situation.
Yes.
Like I can be a normal, good, decent guy, good boyfriend, take care of your kid for 2 years because you're working, you're paying the bills, I'm living in your house.
I'm floating around doing what I want to do.
Right.
Exactly. I think it definitely comes down to it. He's a super narcissistic person. Watched so many hours of interviews with him.
Like maybe if he didn't struggle with mental illness or had channeled it in another way. I mean, I feel like this guy could have either been like a CEO or some con artist running a pawn.
He had, there has to be, he has to have been, he looks scary to me. This guy, I think you can see them when people talk about evil, true evil, madness. The more and more I spent looking at his pictures, watching him talk to investigators, even in normal conversations, he looks scary. But he has to have some element of charisma. It has to be able to turn it on and off to, get in good with people. He got in good with this guy, and this guy's trusting him to a major degree. The multiple women, bringing them into their lives.
Well, that's the thing is, like, Gary wasn't a horrible looking guy.
No, not say when I didn't see any young pictures.
I mean, he was definitely not like a Jerry Brudos or something,
No.
like, ooh. But he wasn't a bad looking guy, and even now he's got the whole silver fox thing going on.
Yes,
and
he has a little bit hooded eyes.
And I think, okay, so if he could turn on the charm and fake fun and interesting,
he's outdoorsy.
Play that part.
I could see him seeming manly, rugged,
and, like,
interesting.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. You want to have sex with Gary Hilton?
No, but I'll be honest. If I had to fuck a serial killer, Ed Kemper. Young Ed Kemper.
Yeah, young Ed Kemper.
I thought he was hot.
What about the guy that does him on Mindhunters? Does he turn you on? That's a big dude.
I mean, he's cute.
Yeah.
He's tall and
he seems smart.
Beefy.
I don't want to have sex with him, but I could see you want to have sex with him.
He's got a little, that bushy mustache and like those glasses.
I don't want to derail the story. I know what's going on.
Well, yeah,
now.
I mean, he would have had sex with me. He would have like cut my head off and fucked it, and that would have been it. But I'm just saying.
He'd had sex with your neck hole.
That of all the serial killers, I mean, I find Ed Kemper hot, but not Gary Hilton.
No, okay. What about younger Gary Hilton?
No, there's something about him. Okay. There's something about Gary Hilton that reminds me of the guy who raised me. Okay, so my parents divorced when I was not super young.
So not your biological father, but
was a young kid. And my mom had this long-term relationship with a guy, like 14, 15 years.
Okay.
So, of course, my childhood, early teens, into my teenage years, they didn't split up until I was like 25 or something.
So he was in your life for a very long time.
So he raised me. I mean, he was in my home, taking care of me, the father figure, making sure, dinner's ready. Do you have what you need? That kind of thing. And he was not a serial killer. He's a really nice man, but had that look of Gary Hilton. So when I look at him, I think he kind of looks like that guy.
So you can't sex up Gary because you mind you're your stepfather.
Right.
Let's get back on
We
track.
are off track here.
We are.
It was during this time that a doctor prescribed Hilton Ritalin. Now, if you're not familiar, Ritalin is a stimulant prescribed to people who have ADD. But Hilton did not have ADD, and this medication affected him adversely. Now, it's my understanding, and I'm fairly innocent when it comes to drugs, but that if you have attention deficit disorder or ADHD,
or a couple of other things,
that this stimulant, it kind of mellows you, it helps you focus, and you seem normal, but maybe a little more sharp.
Right.
I just keep throwing around the word normal, but it helps.
What's normal, man?
But people who take it like recreationally and stuff, it's because it like fucks you up.
Well, it's basically an amphetamine, or is derived from it. And yes, you get all wired up like you did the drugs. So yeah, if you don't need it for those reasons you just described, it totally stimulates you. And yeah.
And this is what was happening. Tabor described Hilton as, he'd been a good employee, and they seemed to have a good relationship, close, were friendly to each other.
He made the man money.
Trusted him. Hey, you can stay in my business. I'm going to help you out. But by 2005, and this was around the time that he started taking the Ritalin, he started exhibiting like this really odd behavior, and it really disrupted the workplace. Taylor believed Gary amped up after being prescribed the medication. He seemed paranoid, exhibited manic behavior,